Hello and welcome to Coffee with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Mama. Before we dive into it, you know it by now. If you like this podcast, be sure to like, share, subscribe so more people can have access to these incredible guests. And speaking of incredible guests, I am such a huge fan of today's guests. Her name is Nadiya Shah. French Vanity Fair named her as a part of the top 12 astrologers in the world. She's a three-time author, she's got a massive YouTube following, and she has Synchronicity University, which teaches people how to access their intuition and how to study the sky and the stars. Whether you're into astrology or not, I can guarantee you are going to be a fan of Nadiya. She has got so much wisdom, and before I continue to fan out, without further ado, here's Nadiya Shah.
I so appreciate you. Thank you for being so lovely and gracious, and thank you. And look at you. Look how beautiful you are.
And look at you, like I'm such a fan. Every week when I log on, the one thing I look for is like, what makeup look are we getting this week?
You're the best. You're the best.
Thank you. I so appreciate your time because I know how busy you are, and I've been following the speaker series, and you've got one today as well. So I was like, thank you for squeezing me into all the busyness because it can't be easy. And I mean, you are what? One of Vanity Fair's best astrologers in the world. I mean, hello. I mean, I can wait. I can wait.
Oh, you're lovely. You're lovely. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nadiya. But just
I'm happy to be here.
take a breath.
Just flowing.
I love the dog.
Thank you. Like this, yes, this because my dog is named Biggie Smalls, right? So I had a portrait made of him as Biggie Smalls, very iconic, and he's like my good luck charm. So I try to have him like over my shoulders or next to me, like his picture, anyways. He's not very cooperative to actually be on camera too much, but when he is, you just kind of see his belly. You don't even see his picture, or you see something cute. No, you just see his stomach or him going like this. But yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. So I was actually doing research and getting to know you, outside of the YouTube videos that I'm always watching, by the way, huge fan. And I came across, it was your Vanity Fair article actually. And it said,
right, because you're from France. So you speak French, yeah.
No, I use Google Translate. It's like copy paste.
I know, I actually did that. I was like, what are they saying about me? Yeah. And I found out about that like a year after it happened. A friend of mine, my friends in Spain, they found it. They Googled me and they were like, oh, wow, congratulations. And I was like, what is this? And it was very cool when I saw it. I was like, this is very cool. Because I'm just here doing my thing, living my life, making my videos, writing my books. Like, you're just so in the grind. You're just so in the moment. And I don't even think I can call it a grind. I mean, it's just, you're in your life, you're living your life. You're not necessarily thinking about that stuff. And I didn't even know like people did that kind of thing. And then there it was, this wonderful accolade, acknowledgement. Yeah, it was, my parents are very proud, so that's good too. I mean, they would be proud no matter what. I know them, but yeah, I'm glad that they have that, because I got to keep going. I'm like, okay, what's next? What book? What do I got to do? Right? I want to spend time with my dog. I want to hang out. I want to travel. I want to do that. So there's always this other stuff right here. And then these big things happen and my parents get to, brag and everything. And that's great. And then, you just go on. What's next, basically?
I love that. I actually do love that because I can so relate to, I think in life, right, we have these moments that we assume that when I get this or when I get here, or whatever it is for each of us, whether it's marriage, whether it's accolades, whatever, you're like, then I'll be able to, whatever we put in, at the end of that sentence. When the truth is, life just continues. Like you get it.
Yeah,
you're like, exactly. Yay, this is amazing. Oh my gosh, am I late for my dental appointment? Like I need to go.
Exactly. I can get very in the moment and then I'm like, oh, but maybe it's because when I was growing up, my mom did that a lot. Like she was always like, we have to go, like to different events and things like that. I think she's an adrenaline junkie. So maybe I got it from her a little bit, maybe. Yeah, I think so. Jupiter in Aries. So yeah, the adrenaline junkie part. That the people who have a lot of fire in their chart will be like, oh, let's go do this. If they don't have an avenue like a sporting event to actually participate in, then they will create it by being late for events and things like that, because it's the feeling of life, right? It's the rush of life. So yeah.
I love that. I actually love how you already intertwined the astrology in, because I know at 14 you already had a flair for divination, right? You knew that your intuition was stronger than most people, or you could access it better. How did that come about? Like, was it a moment? Was it a dream? Like, how did that happen?
So basically, yes, I was always a very intuitive and I would say sensitive kid as well. But when I was growing up in Toronto, every year, every summer, there was this fair, and there still is. I think it was canceled this year because it's an unusual year. But there's this fair called the Canadian National Exhibition, and it takes place over the last 3 weeks of the summer. And I remember every year I would go as a teenager, and I would, starting at 11, I think I was, because I couldn't wait to start working. You know, my parents emphasized the importance of, they were feminists, so they emphasized the importance of having something of your own achievements, your own career, your own money. It was something that was constantly drilled into me, that you should not put yourself in a position where you are with somebody because you need to be financially dependent. You should be with somebody because you want to be. And if that situation is not good, you should be able to leave. You should have that financial ability to leave. So this was a message I remember growing up with. And one of the ways in which I incorporated that was that I couldn't wait to start working. I mean, relatives and family friends thought I was crazy. At 7, at 9, I'm talking about, wow, I can't wait until I can work and stuff. They would look at me like I was strange or something. But that led to me going every summer to this fair, starting in middle school. Actually, I started going. And what happens is you go at the time, I think now it's all online, but you would go and there would be this wall, and this wall would have like cards on them. And you would pick a card and it would tell you what table to go to. And you'd go there and they'd kind of like spontaneously interview you. And often they would just hire you right there. You'd get a call later that day. And so I remember going, picking up a card, going. And when I went, they basically hired me on the spot. And then they gave me a sheet of paper, and that sheet of paper had a hand on it. And there were these arrows that were sticking out, and it said, like, if this line goes up, it means creative. If the lines go straight, it means this. And so basically, I didn't know anything about reading palms, but I was just hired as a palm reader for 3 weeks. And the next day I was reading like 50 to 75 to 100 palms a day, like just back to back, these 5-minute readings. And I was constantly being told how good I was, like, you know, wow, you're really good at this. And so that was the beginning. But then what happened after that summer, those 3 weeks, is that, you know, my parents, my mom in particular, and my aunts, they are big fans of like psychics and astrologers and things. So they always went. They are not, even though I know that people I haven't met in my ancestry have practiced, but they were big fans. And so they were very excited that I, you know, learned to do this. And everywhere I went, people started sticking hands in my face in terms of, you know, being in family gatherings and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I really don't like this. I don't like people sticking their hand in my face. But it was around the same time that my aunt and my mom started giving me astrology books and saying, hey, you'd be good at this. Hey, look at this. And it just kind of grew very naturally, very organically. I was 14 at the time when I started studying astrology, but it wasn't until I was 19 that I started studying charts. And that was because I had like a computer printout made. My aunt gave it to me as a gift, you know, one of these automatic computer generated printouts. And when I read it, I was just blown away because it was me. I felt like this is me on paper. This is phenomenal. This was an amazing thing. And that got me into charts. And then it just really organically grew. Like years later, I remember working at Walmart, and not even years later, a couple years later, working at Walmart, doing chart readings like for my fellows. I worked somewhere else and I was doing readings, and then people started offering to pay me. And then it went through a really difficult transition. And it was during that time, an emotional time, that astrology was really there for me. And it was sort of on the other side of it that I became a full-time astrologer. So that's my story to hear in kind of a nutshell.
I love it. It's like all these small sequences of events that led you to this juncture where it was like leading you, nudging you. But you also got your degree, right? You got your degree at the University of Kent in cosmology, right? And that's also like that layered into your study of astrology. How did it blend itself to what you were already doing at that time?
I feel so fortunate that I had a chance to do that. I just feel like very, very blessed that life presented me with that opportunity. And in 2004, there was this move to bring astrology back into Western universities. And it led to the launch of 4 programs, 2 in the US, 2 in the UK. And I believe that was in either 2005 or 2006. I believe it was 2006, the academic year. And so there was this really new movement at the time. People were really excited. And I just knew when I learned about this, I knew that I had to do this. I had to have this experience. And so 2 of the programs were online. And one program that was live in person is in California. The other is in the UK. And I just felt on a level of my soul that I need to go. Like, this is where I have to be. And it is incredible how it came together. I mean, it really is kind of amazing, but I was so blessed to be able to go and study for a year. And I thought of it as a little bit like Hogwarts. It kind of was, because you're like in like-minded people and completely immersed, and you're reading the books and you're doing the experiments on each other's charts and all of this, and you're learning about so many different things. You're not just learning like astrological technique, that's very like off official time, but academically you're learning about religious history and what the different religious texts say, and who people were and what they thought philosophically, how astrology grew. And it just gives you so much reverence, like to understand that we stand on really broad shoulders, that we as astrologers today owe so much to the astrologers who came before us, whether it's their sacrifices, whether it's their knowledge, the time that they took to cultivate their understanding and their skill and putting it down into writing, and just so much more. Like, we are not existing in a vacuum. We didn't just poof show up here, but that there are people who have thought very deeply and have connected very deeply to the importance of what we do. And I think that was probably one of the greatest gifts of that year. And I'll always be grateful for it. If somebody is academically minded, right? Like if you are inclined in that direction, if you're a big nerd like me, it's a good idea. Go for it. Yeah, go in that direction.
No, I love it, because I can actually tell in your weekly videos, because for those who are listening, Nadiya has these weekly videos on YouTube, and I love what you do with your videos. So I find your videos, I don't listen to them so much for the transits and like what's going to happen, but more from an educational and spiritual standpoint, because you will always bring in philosophy, or you'll bring in like your interpretation of how this impacts the larger collective, and then only how it's going to impact us. And I've always found that so fascinating. And I used to think, geez, because I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, you were speaking about the difference between Western and Eastern astrology, and not astrology, belief systems, and how the East is focused on we, and the West is focused on I. And I remember that was such a light bulb moment for me. I was like, that's it. That's it. And for some reason, it was something I needed to hear in this part of my journey about, how your belief system actually ends up curating this experience, right? And if you believe in the I consciousness, which is, I need to do this, and I, everything that happens is me related versus we related, then that really does impact how you relate to others, how you relate to your community, how you relate to your friends. And I just love how you do that. So is that something that you consciously go in every week and you're like, okay, this is the philosophy of it, and then this is the transits of it? Or is this something that just comes naturally to you at this point?
It can depend. It can really depend. So sometimes, like an idea is kind of ruminating within me, and I kind of know what I want to talk about or what I want to say. And I teach classes on Saturdays, like just before I record the video for YouTube, I teach in the afternoon. And sometimes my students in my classes get a preview. Like my classes are supposed to be 90 minutes, and we always end up going at least 2 or 3 hours, because I kind of go off into these stories and I start thinking about different things. And it's part of the fun. I mean, I do it because it's fun, but also because it provides me with this, like, dress rehearsal for my videos. to figure out like, okay, what ideas are coming forward? What am I feeling? What do I want to say? And all of that. But I also think as I was hearing you describe it, I was thinking, it's kind of like who I am. That's the thing. It's just who I am. Like I grew up in an Eastern home, but born and raised in a Western culture. And so I have always kind of felt like I had my foot in both the East and the West. And I think that both are valuable, like both bring a lot to the table and acknowledge what we need. It's when you go too much to an extreme on one side or the other that I think we lose something, right? We start feeling not as if we are living whole lives. And I think that shows up in so many ways. And, I would even add going to the Buddha, because my studies in Buddhism have been deeply important to me, deeply impactful. And actually before the lockdown, like the thing is, because we're recording this towards the end of 2020, and astrologers for years, and me too, have been saying, look, there's going to be big, big things happening in 2020. And we didn't know the literal way, but we knew archetypally. And we knew that some of that energy can speak to like being isolated, right? Like having to be like cold and in your own space. And so we understood it archetypally, that there were so many different ways it could manifest. And the most powerful way, I think, has been this idea of isolation, like social isolation, but just being forced to be with you. And people are reacting to it in all kinds of ways, right? Saturday Night Live, Chris Rock made a joke that everybody's breaking up. Like that was his way of looking at things. Everybody's breaking up. But also lots of people are having babies. And also lots of people are very afraid to look at themselves, and they're kind of going off in different directions, like way out there. And it is interesting to observe, like to sort of stand back and observe what's going on. We all have our own ways of approaching it. But I say all this because I had planned to go to the birthplace of Buddha. And so I had this whole tour planned in the spring. And so I was first going to go to Turkey, and then I was going to Bangkok, and I was then going to carve out this space and time to make sure to go to Nepal, and I wanted to see some sacred sites as well in Japan. So I had this all planned out before I would head to Costa Rica. Like I had this whole thing planned out. And then of course the universe, especially with Saturn conjunct Pluto, the universe has its own plans. The universe is like, whatever you think you want, whatever you think is going to be. But then it's been very interesting because I haven't been able to actually go and feel it. I've been forced to feel it in here. And so I've been sharing a lot more of that more Buddhist perspective, or from what I have studied. Now, granted, I am, not a Buddhist scholar. My MA is in religious studies, but I know that there are many people out there who are much more learned than me in so many things and in so many ways. But for what I know and what I have to bring, my hope is that I'm able to present it and share something of my spiritual life and the things that inspire me spiritually as I go along to my audience, and that it benefits them in some way. And it is very much like a journey, right? I remember there was a period of time where I was very inspired by some stories or tales around Jesus Christ and the example that was set there. Right now, it's very Buddhist and the example that the Buddha set for us, but it always changes. It always evolves. One person I mention often is an early Sufi mystic named Ibn Arabi. And he was a philosopher and an astrologer. And I wrote my MA dissertation on him. And that was hard. Like it was a tough, let me say, yes, it was great I had the experience, but it was tough. Like graduate school is no picnic. It was a very, very tough time. And, when I went into graduate school, I was thinking like, the holy grail of graduate school is PhD, right? To get your doctorate. Like that's the holy grail. But after that year, I was so done. I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't, I couldn't wait to leave. I was just like, get me out of here. It took me so long to feel at home in England. Like it took me 9 months to even realize where I was going when I was walking around campus. And then I was going to be leaving in 3 months. I was like, oh, well, okay, I'm leaving. And I just couldn't wait to get back home. I went home so many times because the way, like I've lived in Mexico now for 8 years. And when I came here to Cancun, I knew I was home. Like it was instant. It was love. It was comfort. It was just, this is where I'm supposed to be. But I never really felt that in England. So there was that layer of it, even though I made wonderful friends that I still stay in touch with, that I love forever. And I had wonderful experiences and I learned a lot academically. That feeling of ease was never really there during that year. And so I couldn't wait to leave. But I do think that it is interesting to see how I continue to grow and how I continue to evolve. And I'm looking forward to seeing like what is inspired next, what comes forward next. I think that'll be a cool journey too.
I love that we get to go with you on this journey, because I think it is very specific to the time we're in, right? Like, you managed to draw in all this wisdom from parts. I mean, I'm very like interested in religious studies and in history and in philosophy and in mythology. I love it all. And when you teach us astrology through these stories, I find it so insightful. And the Buddha now is very timely, because I mean, he went into isolation. You know, he was under the tree for so long and he was looking for that divine wisdom. And although none of us are under a tree, hopefully, we're all in our apartments or spaces where we have to look within. And it's been so interesting what you're saying about 2020, in the sense that I feel like what it's shown us is that we are so afraid of ourselves.
Exactly. I love the way you, exactly. Yes. And I have shared that in videos as well. And I will, if I end up sharing it this week, I'll be sure to quote you, but that's exactly it. We are afraid of, some of us are very afraid of ourselves. It's not easy, you know, when you've invested so much energy and time in a particular direction, it's not easy. But I know somebody, and I knew her kind of briefly many years ago. She did some like rituals, not rituals, I think that's the wrong way to put it, like Reiki treatments. She did a couple Reiki treatments on me, and we kind of had a bit of a friendship. And she was going through a really hard time for a couple of years. So she was here, but she's Canadian. And I mean, I don't want to like give anything away, of course, I'm not going to say anything, you know, that gives away who she is, but essentially, like, there was like a 2-year period before, like, while she was separated from her partner, and it was an immigration issue, basically. So she was in Canada and she was trying to bring him to Canada, and it wasn't working out, and it took like at least 2 or 3 years to have it come together, an unusually long time for a lot of different reasons. And it was so hard for her, and it was so frustrating. And I remember her reaching out and saying, you know, when is it going to happen? When? And I remember telling her, like, here's the month, it's going to happen here. It was pretty obvious, like, just all this very hard stuff was ending and very good things were coming in very, very quickly. So I was like, okay, yeah, all this is happening then. Like, lots of harmonious Uranus stuff. For those who are students of astrology, you'll understand what I'm saying. And so it happened, right? I remember I was just on Facebook one day and I saw, and she showed pictures of him coming out of the airport and them having coffee, and, you know, but the faces looked kind of worn, you know, the faces, they didn't look elated, right? But it's kind of understandable. You've been through such a journey, you've been separated. She's only seen him like 2 times in the last 2.5 years or whatever. So soon after that, the lockdown happened. And this is a person who's in Canada. And I know something about, you know, their financial situation and things like that. And there are some people who, because in Canada, we have these wonderful social systems in place. Nowhere is perfect, of course, but, you know, pretty automatically, if you needed it, you were able to access funding. And if you weren't able to work, you were able to access funding that very often, in some cases, exceeded what people were making on minimum wage, which I think is great, right? That's how I want my taxes to be used, to make sure that people are okay. And so here's this woman. She hasn't seen this man in so long that she loves so much. Now she's gone into lockdown. She's going to be getting more money than she's making on her own, struggling. This would be the time to have a lot of fun, to just be so grateful, you know, like, if you're in the right relationship, this is where the party really starts. You're like, oh, wow, thank you, universe. I get to, you know, be with my person. But that's not what happened with her, right? And she's been going down a rabbit hole. And a lot of it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, given a lot of different things. But this is, I feel, like a psychological coping mechanism. And it's okay, you know, and it's not to say that people believe all kinds of things. I am sure that there are people who could say to believe in astrology or to practice astrology is a psychological coping mechanism. So I am very aware of that. And I don't think I'm anybody to judge anybody, but I think that there is a difference between people who are very passionately believing something that maybe not a lot of people believe, and that's okay. And those times when you know that that this person is going off in a particular direction because the alternative is too much for them. So it's almost easier to go off in this whole other direction. And so that's kind of heartbreaking to me. And I'm, you know, I'm really open to listening to people and considering other viewpoints. I mean, I not so much on YouTube, but in my classes, you know, I will share people sometimes who are controversial that maybe some people have a bit of a reaction to by watching or seeing just the chart, you know, like these, you know, sort of lightning figures or whatever. But I do it because I care about being fair and looking at the humanity in people, right? And so I think that I am pretty fair, and I can talk to people and I can explore ideas, and people can believe whatever they want. And especially one of my former professors, Patrick Curry, he said, believe whatever you want, just make sure you can explain it. Right. But he was saying academically, of course, but yeah, there's a lot of value in being able to, yes, I believe this, but you know, explain it. Why? You know, where does this idea come from? You know, what's going on? And so that, I think, is a different thing than when you see somebody, you know, they're really struggling, and that's where my heart really goes out. And you know, I can't say anything like to this person. It's not like we're close friends or anything like that, and I can't say anything. I only can allow this person to do what they're doing. It's not in my hands anyway. It's not in my will anyways. And I also think sometimes people need to be there. You know, I remember, and I think this is the first time I'm sharing this because I tried to share this in one of my videos recently, but I started crying. Like that happens sometimes when I'm making my videos, is that I'll start on a line, but then I'll start to cry. So I just stop. Like I just go, okay, let's cut that out, basically. That's why I don't do my videos live, basically, because when I do them live so much, I mean, just, I prefer to do it like sort of to be able to edit it. But in this moment, you know, I'm here with you, so I'll share. I remember many, many years ago, I was sort of in one of those, I didn't realize, but I was in kind of one of those, you know, go in those rabbit holes, I guess you could say. And I remember having this moment, like, and like a series of things had happened. My job had transferred me to a different department. This was my part-time job. I was in university, and had transferred me to a different department. And it was really, really brutal. It was really hard, like dealing with lots of very, very angry and abusive customers. And I really couldn't last very long in there. But I remember one day coming back, and I remember calling my mom, and I said to her, and this was the first time I said it out loud, I said, I'm really mad about what happened to me as a child. And oh, see, I don't want to cry, but see, this is why I didn't put it in my video, because she said to me that whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Whatever you want me to say, I'll say it. I just want you to be happy. And I remember after speaking to her, and I remember getting up and going to the window in my apartment, and I'd lived in that apartment for 10 years. Like I had a relationship. I loved that apartment. I had the view of downtown Toronto. That was my view. That was my neighborhood. And I remember after that conversation, getting up and looking out of this window and these patio doors to the balcony. And I had looked out of that hundreds and thousands of times, really. And everything looked different. Everything looked different, because in that moment, I realized that my happiness was up to me. My peace was up to me. It wasn't the world. It wasn't about changing the world or whatever. That can come in its own time and in its own way. But as far as me being at peace with me and with myself and with my life, it's here. It's not out there. And that was a very powerful thing. And so my heart just goes out to these people, and I know what it's like to be in it. You know, if I were to say this to this person, I know that it would seem, you know, like an attack or condescending or something. And I don't want to do that, but I know what it's like to be in that place where you're in the rabbit hole, because if you were to look at your life, it would be too painful. If you were to look at your unhappiness or in your pain and your trauma and your disappointment and all the hopes that have been crashed, if you were to look at it, it would be so devastating that it's easier to be in the rabbit hole. And so, yeah, I'm seeing this right now. Honestly, I think when we look at the astrology, I think we're going to see more of this. I look at the astrology of 2023, but especially 2024 and 2025 a little as well. We're going to see this sort of peak before we enter a different phase where things become a lot more rational and more scientifically based. And so I think it'll be interesting. I have said for a long time that I think the world that we have at the end of the decade is going to be a very different world than it was at the beginning of the decade. So I'm looking forward to seeing that world too. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for just sharing of yourself with us. And I mean, I completely relate to that rabbit hole. I completely relate to being stuck in that whirlwind. And there are moments, it's like these phases where sometimes you feel like I'm so helpless, like life is happening to me, I can't change this, and you look for evidence to support that, right? You will look for, no, but if I leave this job, then this, or if I look at this, then this. And for me, I think, I mean, I've got a very heavy Capricorn stellium right now and I'm in a first house Capricorn, so it's just been a mess.
I love it. We'll talk about that. Like, can I ask, do you know the degrees?
I'm not 100% sure of my degrees at this
point,
but
I have 2 planets in Capricorn. That's why. So when planets connect between 2 people, that is like a connection, right? That's very powerful. Yeah.
Amazing. And I know we both Sag moons. You mentioned it in your video.
Oh, yay! No wonder we're both nerds. No wonder we resonate, right? Yeah.
Tell me more. But I know that, there have been phases in my own life where it's like I've been stuck in this victim narrative. And I even hate to admit it, because I think when you no one wants to be called a victim, right? When you're going through things, you can justify your pain. You're like, I'm in pain, don't call me a victim. But for me, the most powerful thing was having to go back and look at these woundings and look at these, things that did happen as a child and things that were shattered dreams and people that did disappoint me. And most importantly, not the people that disappointed me, but how I betrayed myself in those relationships or engagements. And I thought, like, for me, it was like the hardest person to forgive in those moments was myself. It wasn't the people, it wasn't the situation, it was the person I was within those situations. And this period, this, changing and shifting that we're seeing, I think is a lot of people either choosing to say, I'm going in, I'm going to do this work, I'm going to work on myself, I'm going to figure myself out, or I'm going to scream at the world. So we're seeing these 2 extremes of like, I am so unhappy within that I would rather cause destruction outside of me, versus the people who are like, I'm going to go inwards. I don't have the answers. I don't know what I'm going to find, but I need to figure it out. And it's hard. It's such a hard balance. And so being an astrologer, I mean, in your classes, when people come to you for a chart, how do you find it? Like, are you finding that people are looking to be more open to their pain, or are people looking like, hey, Nadiya, you need to tell me when this is going to end so I can get to the next phase of my life? Which is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the person, right? It depends on the consciousness that they bring. But I'm very like, if we get to that point where I'm looking at your chart and answering your questions, I'm going to honor the questions you ask, because I feel like on the one hand, people know what they need, but also I feel like we as astrologers have a tradition. Yes, of course, I'm much more interested in exploring, where you are and how to heal and how to move and how to move energy, right? So that you can move towards really feeling like either you're in flow or you're honoring something higher, and that life feels like it has greater ease. So I love being a part of that. But at the same time, I understand that our tradition has that part of it that is connected to things like prediction. And so if somebody says like, okay, when am I going to get married or blah, 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 then I will give them time frames. I'll say, hey, like, here's this thing coming up. Why don't you make sure that you're connecting with others? Why don't you take part in these types of activities or whatever, because you could connect with somebody. And sometimes, the chart says, be proactive, learn, grow. And then sometimes the chart is like, oh, you don't have to do anything, someone's going to show up, right? And so there's always this, you know, balance of figuring out, okay, like, you know, you want to empower them, and then you see predictive things that are very powerful, and that's great too. But at the same time, it's also like, okay, how do we make the most of this? How do you work with the universe? So I honor where people are, but I understand, like, it's much more rewarding, of course, to talk to people who are more willing to explore things archetypally and explore like where they are in terms of their spiritual journey and how they can grow and move forward. But um, I meet people where they are, and it's okay. And the thing is, the spiritual gets in anyways. Anybody who finds me, it's because they watched my videos. And if you watch my videos, even just one, then you get that more spiritual perspective. So you know where I'm coming from, and you know what you're going to get anyway. So it finds its way in there.
I love it. And so you touched on a little bit about, you know, looking at the next couple of years, looking at from now till 2024. I think that's when Pluto leaves, if I'm not mistaken, leaves Capricorn, and it goes into...
It'll be moving in and out of Capricorn and Aquarius, but yeah, as it's moving in and out, that's going to be very powerful. Sorry, go on, your question.
Yeah, so we're looking at this, the next few years, or from 2020 into, like, you know, till 2024. What are the trends you're seeing as a collective that we might be experiencing, but also on an individual level? Like, are we becoming more spiritual? Are we going back to being more logical? How do you see it for, like, because I know we can't predict everything, but if you were to, you know, look at the sky, what would you say?
Well, I think that we are in a time of transition. We are in an ebb, we can say. And we are going to get to a flow, right? And the flow is going to come later in the second half of this decade. And I think that we are, and have ever since the discovery of Uranus. So Uranus was discovered back in the late 1770s. And since that time, I feel like we have been sort of slowly being ushered into a new age. And that new age, what's called the age of Aquarius, right? It's interesting because some people interpret that as very good for astrology, very integrated, like the whole world will live as one. But I think that those characterizations are actually very Piscean. Like, that's a very Piscean way of understanding things. And I think the reason that astrology has grown so much in popularity over the course of the last decade was because of Neptune and Pisces. Like, it was people wanting to feel spiritually connected, spiritually as if their lives have a higher meaning, that they were connected to each other. Like, that was the motivation that led to it. And so it is interesting when I see people talk about how all this Aquarian energy is going to be good for astrology, because the discovery of Uranus banished astrology. Like, it took astrology out of universities, Western universities, and it vilified astrology. Astrology kind of had no place to go after that. And it wasn't until the discovery of Neptune and the New Age movement there, the spiritualism movement, that gave astrology a new home. And that's why to this day, we think of astrology as New Age. And so it's interesting when I see that, you know, sort of that perspective, and maybe that will be the case, and that would be awesome. But I think that we are moving towards a time that is more like hyper rational, hyper scientific, hyper empirical. The energy of Aquarius, yes, can be very tribal, right? We see that, and it can be very fiercely individualistic to the point where it's, you know, to a level where maybe it doesn't benefit you. But it can also be very much about the collective. It is about what makes sense for the most people. And so I think right now it's almost like the energy is totally different than that, because right now we have all of this this Neptune and Pisces. When we get to like 2024, Neptune is just hanging out in what's called anorectic degrees, which is the very end of the sign of Pisces, which is very concentrated energy. And so this is where energy becomes especially strong. And so if you think that you have watched people go down rabbit holes, I mean, I think that is really when we're going to see this, you know, and there are different ways this energy can manifest. It can manifest in terms of more people being on a spiritual quest, and that would be great. You know, that would be a great way to use this energy. The fact that Pluto's going to move in and out of Capricorn and into like sort of be moving back and forth, retrograde, direct, retrograde. I think that that is going to only strengthen that Neptunian energy. So in one way, it can make people search for, want to connect to the spiritualism of that astrology, the astrological worldview offers. But it is also possible that with this energy, it could be like, you know, we might see more of people being more disconnected from reality, maybe even like a lot of, like one very textbook way of understanding this energy can be cults. And so that is part of, you know, my hope that people find a more grounded spiritualism, because it's not good for anybody. If one person, and I know somebody who grew up in a cult, whose parents joined a cult and then they ended up leaving, and he talks about, you know, how traumatic it is and what it does and how it takes so long to heal from that. And so we may see some of that, and my hope is that we don't, that we're able to address it. The energy doesn't have to manifest that way, but it might. And so we do have to be diligent with that. But archetypally, people are going to want to feel connected to something higher. They're going to want a mystical experience. They're going to want to feel plugged into source. They're going to want to be in spaces and places where they feel like they can give and sacrifice, and maybe not necessarily grounded, not very connected to reality as much, right? And so that'll be very interesting. But the fact that Pluto is going to be moving into Aquarius, I think is a very powerful energy, especially in 2026, 2027. Uranus will be in Gemini by then, trining Pluto. And I think that that is going to be this whole new understanding of what it means to be in an information age. And I think that's actually going to start much sooner. We're going to see the seeds of that at the end of this year. So at the beginning of the year, we had the great conjunction. It wasn't the great conjunction. The great conjunction the ancients called was Jupiter meeting Saturn in the sky. That's happening at the end of the year. But at the beginning of the year, we had a different kind of very great energy, which was Pluto meeting Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. The last time that happened was the Protestant Reformation. And so that was this whole new understanding of our relationship to the divine, our relationship to God, not needing intermediaries. And so on a level of soul, that is something that we are experiencing right now. And it isn't going to be the same. It isn't going to be that we're going to have another Protestant Reformation, or that, you know, because we're not the same that we were as humanity 500 years ago. But we are right now in a time of transition. And then the year is going to end with the great conjunction of Jupiter and Aquarius in the sign, Jupiter and Saturn in the sign of Aquarius. Now, that energy hasn't happened for 600 years. And the last time that happened was the printing press. And my friend Rick Levine, he encapsulated it so perfectly. He said that we are going to go from paper, like if the first conjunction was going from an oral culture to a paper culture, we are now going to go paperless, like completely paperless. So I think that is going to be very interesting as well to see how we manifest that, but it's just the beginning. And this century, we're going to have 60 years from now, we're going to have another great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius as well. So all of these do suggest, and with Pluto, big technological and rational rooted growth that is set to take place. Now, at least for 2022, 2021, my apologies, coming up, we are going to have the Saturn-Uranus square. And when we got a little bit of a taste of that, that was Black Lives Matter movement. That was, you know, what happened with George Floyd, the sense of shock, but also being like motivated and propelled towards action and wanting social change. And that energy is going to become precise over the course of 2021, like again and again. Yeah, like it is going to be an ongoing energy. We got just a little taste of it. These planets came a little bit what we call in orb. They came close to precision, but not quite. They were still quite wide, but it's going to get very precise. So we're going to see that sense of social upheaval or change or desire for social change. How we incorporate that, of course, is a part of our own individual journey. And then what that's going to mean, how will that serve or feed into what happens with Neptune later? I mean, I think that these are the larger questions. but it's also it's exciting too. I think we're going to get a little glimpse of that, that sort of out there energy of Neptune, because Jupiter is going to dip into Pisces a little bit later in the middle of 2021. But then in 2022 is going to meet Pisces, is going to conjunct Pisces. That's going to magnify that energy as well. So there's a lot to watch, right? There's a lot to look forward to. And, I've been making videos for so many years now. I launched my channel in 2008. And so I'm looking forward to exploring it, to walking it with everybody and walking it together and making sense of it as we go along. But it's big. It's a big time.
I'm like, so the roller coaster is just beginning. Just strap yourself in.
Exactly.
Go with the flow. Go with the ride. And so, yeah. I mean, these are.
Can I just say, I do think, sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to say that one thing that I did say was that, predict earlier, was that Saturn conjunct Mars at the very beginning of Aquarius. Whatever happens then, it's like, it looks completely different and much more hopeful and much more better once we get to the great conjunction at the winter solstice in December. And what is happening? Well, right when those two planets met, Mars and Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius, the whole world shut down, right? It was the lockdown. There was this virus, and there was that very accelerated isolation, being on your own. And so I do think that Jupiter meeting Saturn, that could bring with it like vaccine or cure, that could bring with it the change very quickly for that matter. And it could bring other types of scientific progress as well. I'm hoping it also indicates like social progress also. And so we'll see a lot of that really starting to begin in late December, but really those ideas will be taking off more and more once we get into 2021. So I'm hopeful. Like, I know I can make it sound very, and I don't mean to be doomy and gloomy. All of these things have their wisdom, but ideally, people won't suffer. Like, that's the thing. I hate that. I just, that is something I feel very deeply. And you were saying something earlier, and sorry to kind of go in a different direction now, but you said something very beautiful and interesting. And you talked about this idea of forgiving yourself. And I have those moments too, right? Like, you'll remember something or something you did because we didn't know any better, right? Now, whether that was because we were in a situation with another person, or whether that was that we were behaving unconsciously, we were repeating patterns, And I have had moments where I have felt like, wow, I did that, or I said that, and maybe I shouldn't have, whatever, knowing that I had hurt somebody in my unconsciousness, and perhaps unintentionally, often unintentionally. And then I've thought about when that's happened to me. And I have literally sent a burst of prayer to that person, where if I felt that if I thought that they thought, hey, do you think that you did something wrong to me? I hope that you can forgive yourself now. Because I am working to forgive myself. And so my hope is that they are doing the work to forgive themselves. And I'll give you an example. I remember there was this one person in grade school, like, we were very young in grade school, and he was quite the bully. He was quite the bully. And I remember somehow he ended up being added to my Facebook. And I was like, okay. And my brother couldn't understand it because my brother really got the brunt of it. But this person has, in his own way, not said, I'm making amends, or I'm sorry, not done any of that. But based on the very few times this person has commented or tagged me, I have understood that he is wanting to make amends. And it has been very apparent. And I have thought, that is so beautiful, to be able to acknowledge, to be able to bring love now, even if you can't say, and I can understand why he wouldn't want to say, hey, I'm sorry, because he doesn't know what we remember, how we see things, he doesn't want to drudge up old wounds. And it's hard to go to that length to say, hey, if I did anything, I'm sorry. But I could understand that he is wanting to change and shift the energy because of how he feels about it. And I thought that that was very beautiful, a very beautiful thing. And my hope is that, anybody who might have felt that they did something wrong to me and has any regret, that they find some peace with it. Because I think I can find peace with the things I've done that I either regret or wish that I wasn't so wounded that I repeated that wound to other people. But you know, it's never going to be perfect because it's life. And people are going to do all kinds of things, sometimes with the best of intentions, sometimes out of love. They'll do things that end up being very hurtful, very hurtful. When I was young, I remember I was fiercely independent, and I had such a desire to express myself, right? I was such a freedom lover, and like my parents didn't know what to do with it. On the one hand, they loved it, right? They wanted me to be Prime Minister of Canada and become a lawyer to direct that energy. But on the other hand, there were definitely moments where it caused strife. And a lot of times that worked out in terms of my outfits, of my appearance. And that was really hard for me because I was like, when I was growing up, you know, in Toronto, there were very, very few South Asian people. Like now, Toronto is like 25% South Asian, but at that time, there were very, very few. If you saw a South Asian family walking on the street, you stopped to talk to them. And I was like darker than everybody in my school. I was bigger. I was like, you know, one of the big kids, and I was taller and all of that. So it was like already that layer is there. And then there's the layer of, well, I want to express myself. I want to wear the clothes. I want to, you know, dress crazy and put things in my hair or whatever. And that part not always being understood, but also not having the sizes to do that. Like, it's so wonderful now. And years ago, I remember I had gained some weight a few years back, and I had gotten sick. I gained some weight, but I ended up losing it. And for the most part, now I'm a curvy woman, and there's nothing wrong with being a curvy girl. So that's really great. But it was so powerful to me now to be in a place where I had become larger. But this time I had clothing that I could, you know, get, because there's options available to us now. And I think that maybe I had to have that experience because it healed that child within me. But I just remember like all this fighting about my clothes, like for years and years and years while I was growing up, this constant fighting about what I'm wearing and why don't you wear this, and you're showing too much this, or you're doing too much that, and that lipstick doesn't look good, and blah, 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 all of that. But it was not coming from a place of wanting to hurt me, you know? And so bringing healing to that part of me that might have felt like I wasn't accepted or I wasn't able to express myself, and how hurtful that was, or to get the message that I wasn't worthy of expressing myself because of my appearance, and having to heal those messages I got around it. But ultimately, those were rooted in either other people's pain, or they were rooted in good intentions, sometimes rooted in love. And you just kind of go, okay, that was then, now here I am. Let me try to live in the moment. But I think it takes time. You do the work to get there, you know? Yeah. But yeah, as you were talking, I know we kind of touched on a few different things there, but I wanted to share that as well, like in terms of what you were saying.
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I just love how you brought it all together, because I think it is so important, right? And it is about understanding that we are on a human journey. And most of us, unless we're the Buddha, aren't going to reach this place of complete enlightenment. You are still going to be triggered by childhood wounds that you didn't even know were there. You're like, what? You know, when you heal it, you're like, that was still there. I didn't even understand that I was still carrying that, you know? And I love that you just brought that in, and you're like, some people don't even mean to hurt us. And I think that is the most important understanding, that when we internalize other people's behavior towards us, and we say, this person knew it was going to hurt me, and you actually sit down with that person, because I've had these moments where I'd sit down with someone and I'd say, when you said this, that, and I came in guns blazing, and they would literally, I would see in their expression that I didn't even mean it like that. I'm so sorry. Yeah. If I knew, I would have changed it. I would have, and you know, and you start understanding that people have their own realities, and people have their own wounds that they think, oh, when I was younger, I went through this, and I don't want you to go through it. So my way of expressing that is going to say, don't wear that. don't be here, don't go with that person, don't, and you're thinking, why? Am I not good enough? And then it feeds into your wounding, not so much what the person is saying, right? So being a human being is this complex web, which I love. Like, I love most of the time.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Oh, Nadia, I hate that we have to bring this to a close, but one thing, if you had like a time portal and you could go back in time and you could go to 18-year-old Nadia and you could say anything, what would you say?
Oh goodness. I don't remember if I've thought about that. I have imagined myself going back to a younger version of me and hugging myself, and I would say, I mean, I remember at 18, that was when a lot of the wounds really started to come forward. Like that was really when, I was in this very emotional space. I was such a sensitive person. And I mean, my instinct is saying, say be open to the journey or something. Maybe don't take everything so seriously. But I think, I think about how many regrets I have because I didn't demonstrate self-value or self-love. That's part of it. But then I think, maybe that's not it, because I think that I was always somebody who wanted to experience life. And I mean, Sag Moon, right? I wanted to know it for myself. I wanted to experience it for myself. And I wanted to be open to everything, new experiences in the world and everything like that. And, so I always kind of followed that. I think I fought a lot, like to rebel. And maybe that wasn't as necessary because I was quite rebellious. I mean, I feel now when I look back with perspective, I feel kind of bad for my parents, like, because I was at times needlessly very rebellious. But, for all that, I would say, it'll all make sense one day. Maybe that's it. And be open to the journey. When I was 18, I thought I needed to be Madonna. Like that was in my mind because she was the only woman at the time who really had like a platform and a voice in the world. And in that way, especially, there was a time when she had the world's attention, and I didn't realize at the time, but I just wanted a platform. And so because I was trying to be Madonna, I feel like I did a lot of things that were very performative, or pursued. Like I tried to be a singer for many years, an actress for many years, but it never felt right. Like it was never something that was natural to me, like easy to me, the way that astrology was, the way that talking is, the way that writing is. Like these things are, me being in my zone. And I remember when I had the realization that the world already has a Madonna, doesn't need another Madonna, but maybe it could use a Nadia, and then not knowing who that was, right? After that, it really was like a year of mourning. I was like numb for a year. I remember my friend said to me that during that time, it was like she could see me and I was there, but it was like I was gone. And it was, I mean, I was in so much emotional pain because I didn't know who I was. But all I knew was I'm not Madonna and I'm not meant to be Madonna. Now what? And it was, really building myself out of that, that I came to discover something of me. But it's still evolving, it's still growing. And every week that I get to make a video and every time I, write something or whatever, it is another chance to discover like whom that is or what that may be and what my contribution may be, and allowing that to come forward more and more, getting out of the way. And when I say getting out of the way, I mean getting the ego, getting the wounded child, getting the insecurity, whatever, getting it out of the way so that I can just be like where I'm supposed to be, in a different, higher, more loving, more wise vision for my life. And yeah, if I could find a way to convey this, I mean, maybe it would just be a feeling, but if I could convey this feeling to 18-year-old me, yeah, things would have been very different. But what I do say all the time is you can't pay me to go back. You cannot pay me to go back. I would not go back and live that again. I have been very resistant to having children because I don't want to relive that again. But I don't know, my friend, she was saying to me the other day that it actually can be very healing. If you feel called to have children, it can actually be very healing to that wounded child, because you see it differently and you realize how resilient children are and things like that. Yeah, maybe, but right now, I'm like, you know what? I'm so focused on what's ahead. I'm not even thinking about that too much. I don't have too much work to do. Stuff comes up sometimes. I feel it. I send love, and then I look to the stars and I look to the future. And that's a good place. I like the future, so I always did. What can I say?
Oh man, Nadia, I could literally speak to you for days. Like I'm like, I don't want this to stop.
Well, look how amazing you are. Well, thank you so much. You created this beautiful space, first of all, this safe space where I could just be myself and go along for the ride. You listened amazingly, and you just have such a light. You have such a glow. Look at you. Oh my God, I'm so excited to see what you do. My goodness. Well, you're so beautiful, but your energy is so beautiful too, you know? So I am just really very, very excited to see how you continue with your own path and how you continue to run with it. We're connected now. We're on like social media together and everything. So I'm looking forward to that.
And I'm going to send you my degrees, because there must be something. Something is happening in our stars.
Oh, yes. We love each other. There's got to be
already.
Yeah.
Like, I have to know.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for sharing so generously of yourself. It's honestly been an honor. And I look forward to continuing this conversation in some other way, in some other platform. But thank you so much. And I'll speak to you soon.
Yes, and please keep shining your light, because it is a very special, very bright light.
I mean, that was such a good conversation. I loved every single part of it, and I learned so much from Nadiya. I know I'm going to be listening to this podcast, taking notes and making quotes. I hope you are too. I hope you loved it as much as I did. And if you did, please go reach out to Nadiya. All her contact information will be in the description box below. Share with me what your favorite quotes are. And thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will speak to you soon.